The World Health Organization says that the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza is now spiraling out of control. And we'll be talking about that today here on the Left Wing. My name is Desmond Price of the Independent Thought Podcast, joined by my co-host, Dr. Erica from Cocktails and Capitalism. As mostly everyone knows at this point, there has been an ongoing war between Israel and Hamas within the region of Gaza, which is an occupied territory within the country of Israel. This has all been coming, as most of you know, because, after Hamas launched some rockets into Israel, killing, several hundred people a couple of weeks ago, they then responded by doing just relentless amounts of airstrikes throughout the area of Gaza, which has displaced so many people. So many have lost their lives. We just want to give everyone a quick update about what we know that's happening on the ground right there as the situation continues to envelop. So right now, Palestinian health officials have said that more than 3,700 people are confirmed to be dead. That number is unfortunately increasing day over day. So that number could actually be a lot higher, but that's the best that we know of right now, because unfortunately, Israel has sealed off the area. They are not allowing any journalists to get into that area to independently fact check anything. So all the information that we do have is coming from the Palestinian Health Administration, and also what we're receiving from the Israeli government. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel will continue to not allow any humanitarian aid going into Gaza from Egypt, but it will allow some supplies into Gaza from its own territory. But they said that they will not do that until Hamas releases all hostages. The State Department today, the U.S. State Department, issued a rare worldwide alert saying that all U.S. citizens abroad to exercise extreme caution as protests have erupted throughout the Middle East. Now, Gaza, for those who are not aware, again, this is a 25-mile kind of like a stretch of area. About over 2 million people live in this area, very densely populated. I think the third most densely populated area in the world. They are currently without electricity because it's been shut off by the nation of Israel. We're also seeing that hospitals are running on generators, trying to keep things, going. They are running out of food. They are running out of water. People who are working in these hospitals are having to rely on drinking things like IV fluid and salt water in order to maintain themselves. Now, this is all coming at the backs of, obviously the ongoing Israeli bombing spree that's been going on. And to which, the Israeli defense minister recently said that they're not really fighting people, they're fighting human animals.
Yeah.
And not only that, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently said that Hamas is like Nazis and ISIS, and that the world must stand behind Israel to defeat Hamas. He also went on to say that Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran are an axis of evil that wants to eradicate the state of Israel. Back home here in America, over 300 people were arrested at the Capitol protesting what's happening over in Israel and Gaza. And we are also seeing currently that the several people at the UN literally turn their backs onto our US ambassador in protest of the Israeli bombings in Gaza. Erica, with everything going on right now, just kind of before we kind of go any further with some more details that are coming out of this region, what are your biggest takeaways about everything that's been going on right now, in Gaza?
My biggest takeaway is that it is the most devastating thing that I've ever witnessed on television, on my phone. Seeing the war in Iraq, I didn't see it in this detail. I wasn't seeing the carnage like I'm seeing this. It is a humanitarian disaster on a scale that is, not unprecedented, but it is in even Palestinian history. This is huge. I mean, during the Nakba, I think 800,000 Palestinians displaced. We're seeing potentially more people being displaced right now. That is mind-blowing. The reality on the ground, yeah, like you said, doctors drinking liquids out of IVs because they're just completely out of water. Israel won't let any of those things in, even though they've said that they are going to, now that, Biden has pressured them. But, you're seeing details like doctors and, parents of children writing the names of kids on their backs or on their hands because they're assuming that these kids are going to be killed and that they are going to have to try to identify their bodies after the fact in whatever state that they are in. So I've never heard of a situation like that where children are having to write their fucking names on their bodies so that their families can know who they are. I've never seen wills written by children that are being shared online talking about their shoes and the little bit of money that they have and giving that to their cousins and their mom and their sibling, who hasn't been killed yet, So it's just the most devastating thing I've ever seen. And I've been fluctuating between incredibly just kind of devastated by it and melting down and then just pouring myself into it more because it's all I can think about.
It's hard not to. I mean, I will say that it does feel like there's a little bit of hope out there, and I'm going to get to that a little bit more here momentarily, but the response here at the US, it seems to be shifting. It does seem as though more people are coming out in the side of, being anti this conflict, being pro-Palestinian. People, I think, are for the first time in their lives waking up to what this situation has been for so many people in Gaza, in the West Bank, which we haven't been talking about as much during the situation. People are for the first time in their lives learning about all of this and then realizing at the same time, like, oh my God, I had no idea what was going on over there. I had no idea people were living like this. I had no idea, because we've always been just told one set of, of a narrative about what's going on over there. So now people are seeing it with their own eyes, and it's very different. I think, going back to the Iraq war, for instance, for so long in our nation's history, we only would get the information that you would get through mainstream media sources, right? Because that's all that was available to you. This is like the first time in our history where everyone has access to the internet and everyone can share information so quickly. And it's really hard, and I think, for the governments of the world to essentially fabricate things. It's harder for them to, spread information that's not correct. So, unfortunately, one of the things we also need to mention is that there is no internet service, like within Palestine or within Gaza either. So, a lot of the information that we could be getting out of there is less than what we are. But even from what we are getting out of there, it's horrific. It truly is. It's hard to see it. And I am seeing there's less and less of like the pro-war stances that I think we've seen in the past. And I think that is a notable positive shift, if there's any positive to take out of this whatsoever. But unfortunately, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, said that this conflict will probably go on for years. And I have no idea what that even looks like. President Biden has made so many different mistakes, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to dealing with all of this. But, the one positive thing that I will grant him is that he did say that he thinks it would be a mistake for Israel to occupy Gaza militarily once this is all over. So I don't think they should be there in the first place. But I agree. And I'm glad that he's saying that. I hope that puts some pressure on Israel. So it's, there's not a whole lot of positives going on here. But, hopefully, if the international community can continue to speak up, can continue to put pressure, continue to call your representatives, tell people to speak out against this, hopefully that will lead to just some of the war drums being stopped beaten. Hopefully that's the goal anyway. Yeah.
And we're going to talk about it more in another segment. The bombing of the Al-Ahli hospital, that has really been a huge turning point in this war. It's hard to call it a war when it's so one-sided, but that, I think, is changing the sentiment from people around the world about this, and has maybe, hopefully, stalled Israel in its ground invasion. Hopefully that, because there's so much pushback, and I'm surprised that the ground invasion hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think about that? Do you think that it could be, they could be stalling or maybe even moving back from that?
That's definitely a good question, and I think I'm going to get into more of those details a little bit when we talk about like the geopolitical angle of all of this.
Oh yeah.
But like I have to just say briefly on that, I think the reason that they're not doing it is because they realize just how much the world really isn't on their side right now.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, yeah.
when you have Benjamin Netanyahu asking the world really to be on your side, and essentially trying to liken Hamas to ISIS and things of that nature, and saying that what happened to them was their own version of 9/11. Like they're trying to drum up support for themselves so that they can do more. And it's just not really catching the way it used to. We're seeing
Yeah.
polls coming out here in America where support for this seems to be high over the age of 50. There's a majority of support, but under the age of 50, it's just less and less and less and less. And, I think right now, at a time where Biden, for instance, that people don't want to hear about something like this, but this is this is an election year for him, and he's thinking about running against Donald Trump and trying to make sure that he's popular enough to win again. And most of the dissent is coming from his base. And so I think Israel needs the US's support in order to continue to do what it wants to do. And I don't think they have the ability to do so right now because, well, I don't think the Biden administration really is super on board with continuing to onslaught into Gaza, when at home the support for doing such just keeps eroding and eroding, which I think, again, for those of you who are watching who have been speaking out against this, more of that, because it does really matter.
Yeah. And it's good to see it not only in the US, but in Israel as well. The citizens are kind of standing up and saying, this is not what we want. And that is very surprising. That is something that I haven't seen to this degree before. So yeah, that is one silver lining, maybe.
Right. I'm going to say one final silver lining here.
Yeah.
This is something that I got from our friends at Ground News. A State Department official sent a resignation letter in today, and he made it public, to which I'm going to read a little bit of that for you here because I thought it was incredibly harrowing personally. So this is going to go up on the screen now. It said, I joined the Bureau of Political Military Affairs over 11 years ago and found it a fascinating job with engaging and often immensely challenging intellectually and morally tasks and objectives. I have been proud in my time of service to have many differences, both visibly and behind the scenes, for advocating for Afghan refugees, to pushing back on pending administration decisions to transfer lethal weapons to countries that abuse human rights, to sculpting policies and practices that advance human rights, to working tirelessly to advance those policies and decisions that are good and just, from our global humanitarian efforts to meaning efforts to support for Ukraine's defense in the face of murderous Russian aggression. When I came to this bureau, the U.S. government entity mostly responsible for the transfer of that provision of arms and partners and allies, I knew it was not without its moral complexity and moral compromises. I made myself a promise that I would stay and fight for as long as I felt the harm I might do be outweighed by all the good I could do. In my 11 years, I've made moral compromises that I can recall, each heavily, but each with my promise to myself in mind and intact. I am leaving today because I believe that in our current course with regards to the continue and indeed the expanded and expedited provision of lethal arms to Israel, I have reached the end of that bargain. Now, let me be clear, Hamas's attack on Israel was not just a monstrosity, it was a monstrosity of monstrosities. I also believe that potential escalations by the Iran-linked groups such as Hezbollah or Iran itself would further cynical exploitation of this existing tragedy. But I believe to my core of my soul that the response Israel is taking, and with it the American support for both that response and for the status quo of the occupation, will only lead to more and deeper suffering for both the Israeli and the Palestinian people. And it is not in the long term of the American interest. This administration's response, and much of Congress's as well, is an impulsive reaction built on confirmation bias, political convenience, intellectual bankruptcy, and bureaucratic inertia. That is to say, it is immensely disappointing and entirely unsurprising. Decades of the same approach have shown that security for peace leads to neither security nor to peace. The fact is, blind support for one side is destructive in the long term to the interests of the people on both sides. I fear we are repeating the same mistake we have made these past decades, and I decline to be a part of it any longer.
Wow, that's really powerful.